Okay, so one of my all-time favourite methods is a waggler. It's overlooked by a lot of people, which I can't understand, to be honest with you, especially on open water like this, where you've got all that lake to explore. Obviously, snake lakes, you don't need it. I mean, I suppose snake lakes are quite popular. I'm waffling again, aren't I? Anyway, coming back to the waggler. The reason I love it is because, as I say, you can start off on it whilst you're priming your pole swims. There's nothing obtrusive over the top or anything like that, nothing to spook the fish, and it's a fantastic way of catching fish. So let's go through the setup then. So, ideally, reel size, it needs to be roughly sort of like 2.5, 3,000 the absolute most. You don't want a big cumbersome reel. Main line needs to be quite fine. I'll talk you through the wagglers in a sec, but the reason it needs to be fine, ideally no sort of thicker than a 0.18 diameter, is because of the friction for your rod rings. So when you're casting these light wagglers out, obviously if your line's too thick, like 0.20, 0.22, you're just not going to get the distance. Now, the whole sort of purpose of waggler fishing is to fish comfortably where you can get that feed. Now, a maximum range with these Drennan catapults is going to be sort of 20, 22 metres. Anything further than that, you're putting too much pressure on and your feed's just been going all over the place. I mean, it is going to go over a big area anyway. I'm waffling again, aren't I? I just can't help it. Come back to the setup. So, 0.16 main line. Ideally, waggler rods, you want a nice light waggler. 13 foot ideally. 12 foot you'd get away with, but the reason for 13 foot is you're just picking the line up a lot quicker, so you're into them fish better. Coming to the setup itself, we'll start off at the float end. Now, I'm going to go through plumbing up with you. A lot of people struggle with it, so I'll go through plumbing up in a sec. I've cast out already, and I know I'm sort of off depth, and I'll explain why I've started off depth and what I'm looking for when we're plumbing up. But basically, you can see the waggler. It's only a small waggler, 1.75 gram, but more importantly, it's an insert. Now, I'll always predominantly use, no, not predominantly, I'll always use loaded floats. I'll never use unloaded floats. Reason for that is I don't want to put them harsh sort of non-toxic shots around my float because it just damages your line. Yeah, there's things you can do, you know, put a bit of silicone on, put it in double line, this, that and the other, but for me, the shot that I want to put around my float is lead. Now, you can legally use lead up to size 8 in this country, so what I've got there is stots. Now, it's pretty much the only time I'd use stots on the line. Normally I'll always use shots, but with these, because I want to be changing depth, I might want to go shallower, I might want to go more over depth, there's a bit of a toe on it, a bit of wind. That's why I'm using stots, because stots are a lot easier to move on your main line than shots are. You see I've got a little gap in between the shots there for the waggler. Now that's important because if it was real tight to it, like that, when you're striking against a float. So what you need is that little gap in the line there. You're getting in on that, Rich? Zoomed in, mate. So that when you strike, your float collapses and you're in direct contact with a fish. Again, if we miss bites, it's because the line is. I don't miss proper bites. So that's that bit set up there. Now, shots either side of it, I could have substituted them, you know, and put even more shots on, but roughly 4 number 8s either side will be perfect. Incidentally, I've put a little tiny bit of line in the bottom of that float there, just so the weights hold in. Now, it's a 2 gram weight on that. These floats come with a 1.75 one. So what I do, I put a heavier weight in the bottom, so I don't have to put as many shots on around the float. Always thinking, aren't I? I don't know if I've touched on this yet, but more importantly, the insert with the waggler. Obviously, we're fishing for sort of silvers, well, anything that swims basically, but if you're fishing a straight waggler, straight meaning it's that shape all the way through to the tip, then there's a lot of resistance there. I mean, that's what you'd use in the summer, but this time of year, you've got to be using them inserts so that you can really dot it down. The fish don't feel hardly any resistance when it takes your bait. Proper. Oh, it's just proper. Right, coming down the line. So we've set this at roughly sort of 5.5, 6 foot, something like that. And what I've got down the line, in fact, I'll start off from the hook end. So I've got an 18s hook on. Hooks are very personal for the angler, you know, whatever you've got confidence in, use. You don't want an overly fine hook and you don't want a hook that's too heavy. So you want sort of like a medium sort of wire gauge. This is an 18s Gamakatsu 2260 BB. Hook length definitely makes a difference on waggler. You know, there's no need for sort of 4-6 inch hook lengths with this like you would with a pole fishing. I want minimum of 10 inches so that when it's falling through the water, it's lovely and natural. So I've got a 10 inch hook length, it's 0.12 for a waggler. You can get away with fishing slightly heavier on a waggler as long as you are using a long hook length so it falls nice and natural. Our first dropper shot, it's going to be sort of 12 inches away from the hook. is a number 10. And what I've got is a series, I've got 4 number 10s on up the line. If it's a little bit shallower, I'd have had 3 number 10s on, but anything up to sort of, or over 5 foot should I say, you want 4 shots on. And this will do up to a maximum of sort of 6.5, 7 foot, then I'll just put another shot on. If I wanted to get the bait down quicker, I'll put heavier shots on, but number 10s is going to take your bait through nice and slow. But more importantly, I'll go through like what you're looking for when you're casting. Basically, you're watching you float through the air when you go to cast. Just before that waggler hits the water, you want to completely stop your line on the spool. Don't clip up, because obviously, again, I'll talk you through it more. When you're loose feeding, it's going to go over a big area. So by clipping up, you're just going to the same spot every time. The whole essence of loose feeding is you can cover more water. So coming back to the feathering, watch the float through the air, just before it hits the water, completely stop your line so that your float lands, but more importantly, your hook bait is getting trajected past your float so that you can have that nice tight line from your float and that's falling through lovely and natural. It's a fantastic way of fishing. Now, plumbing up wise, this is an area where a lot of anglers will struggle with a waggler. They'll get like a big traditional plummet out, chuck it in, it's just making miles too much commotion. So what you need is a bigger shot. So make sure your rig's shotted right first and then get a bigger shot. I use an AA or an SSG, anything big like that. We'll get one of these out. And I'm just going to, if you get in, Rich, are you in, mate? Are you in on the hook? Are you in on the hook? What I'm going to do is get the AA and put it on the hook and just squeeze it on. Now that is our plumb up. You can be really, really accurate. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to twist round and talk you through plumbing up and what we look for. Yes. Okay, so plumbing up wise, I've chosen an area where the water's nice and dark. I don't want it sort of, if you look opposite me, get panned in, Rich, get panned in. It's all broken up, it's all different colours. So I'm going to go round to my right where I'm opposite a nice dark green bush, cheeky, and that's where I'm going to be casting into. So what I'm looking for when I'm going to cast, obviously, if we can't see the float, then we know we're off bottom. So I'll feather that down, you'll see that shot is taking that float under. I've had a cheeky cast before, so I know roughly, you know, what depth it is. Now what I'll do, if I can't see my float, I'm going to come back and I'm going to go up at 8-inch intervals. So what I'm going to do is bring that float all the way back. I'm going to slide my shots up. Now this is why I use stots and not shots, because these will move a lot easier. What I don't want to do is move that bulk though, because it's putting too much stress on your line. So I'll just move them singly at a time. So roughly about, well, it's probably 6 inches that. 6 inches, 8 inches at a time, move each one. So that when I cast in this next time, obviously if I can see me float, then I know I'm on the bottom. Now it's a really accurate way of plumbing up with that little shot on. So if I can see the float this time, what I'll do then is come back down at sort of 4-inch intervals. And then obviously if you can still see me float, then I know I could have been just at dead depth before. And then I'll move it down 2 inches. And if I can't see me float, obviously I know it was there or thereabouts. So I'll put it back up 2 inches or 4 inches, depending on conditions. I mean, today I'm not going to go a lot over depth because there's no wind, there's no tone of water. So I'll probably have it a couple of inches over depth. I do always fish over depth on natural baits, not with pellets, but natural baits I'll always go anything from 1 inch to 3 inches over depth. So that's gone up sort of like 7 inches, something like that. We'll have another cast. So I'd imagine this time we'll probably be able to see the float. So again, feather it down and let a lot of line out. Just wait for that to catch up with itself, and there you go, you can see the float. So we know we're on the bottom now. So what I'm going to do this time, bring it back, then I'm going to pull the float down 4 inches and have another cast and see where we are. Obviously we can't see the float, we know from last time we're thereabouts. So pull it back down 4 inches, again single shot at a time, pull that down. So it's just a real accurate way of getting the correct depth. I know what I'm aiming for. I'm aiming for, as I said, that dark area. And trust me, when you loose feeding with a catapult, it's going to be going over a bigger area anyway. So that's come down 4 inches. Let's have another cast and see where we're up to. Feather that down. Let a load of line out and wait for that float to come back up. And he's not. So we know from like putting it up that, oh, you just about see it there. Can you pick that out, Rich? That float's just popped up there. So for me, that's going to be sort of like thereabouts, dead depth. So I'm going to pull it down another couple of inches, just so I can show you how accurate it can be. So I'll pull that down another couple of inches to about there. We shouldn't be able to see our float this time. So I'll know that that was probably bang on. That depth that we just had there was probably bang on. So if we cast out this time, we're probably not going to be able to see the float, especially not with that ripple on it. Ugh. Let a load of the line out, and no, that float would have come up by now. So we know that last cast we did that time would have been roughly sort of 2 to 3 inches over depth, which is perfect. So I'm going to bring that back and then put it up another 2 or 3 inches. So as I said, there's nothing complicated with plumbing up. The worst thing you can do is put like your traditional plummet on. That's not what you want to do. So that's going back up sort of 2 or 3 inches, so we know we're just over depth. We're finally ready to start them. We've been through this setup, we've been through plumbing up, now it's time to go and extract them lovely fishes. I want to go through hooking the maggot correctly first though. So, what I see time and time again is anglers hooking that maggot far too deep. Basically, the thick end of the maggot, the little frilly bit, you're getting in, Rich, you on it mate, you on it. The little frilly bit, we just want to nick it just through that little frilly bit there. So it's got plenty of wriggle in it, but more importantly, you're not bursting it. Now, I always tend to start off on a single maggot. Depending on what's happening will determine whether I go on double maggot. Usually I only go on double maggot if I'm after sort of bigger fish. I'm trying to deter the advances of them small fish. If I was going to put 2 maggots on, I'd put the other one through the tip, so like the opposite way around, so right through the nose bit there. So you see there's plenty of wriggle in them both, but obviously that's going to be sort of a couple of inches over depth. That's going to be lying on the bottom, and you know, all them vibrations that they're giving off is just really attractive to the fish. But as I say, we're starting off on a single maggot. Now, there's a few different ways of feeding, depending on what sort of fish you're after. Now, if I was fishing, there's a lot of like eyed or chubbing, fish like that like to feed up in the water, I'd be feeding first and then casting into it. But I'm going to see what the response is like first. I'm going to cast out to our mark, as I say, it's over a roughly area, sort of 20 to 22 metres, anywhere there, and I'm going to feed on top of it. See what the response is first. So, incidentally and all, when we're casting out, what I'll never do is have too short of a drop from me rod tip to my float. You want roughly sort of, certainly minimum of 4 foot, 4 to 6 foot, and it's more of a sort of guide rather than actual cast. I'm not going to put a lot of force into it because I want that float to go nice and straight, but more importantly, I don't want it to land with a big thud in the water, which can sometimes happen if you wind too much. So a nice sort of 4 or 5 foot drop, swing it out first. So you see there that action, just before it hits the water, I'm stopping the float so that my bait's going past my float. Right, next thing I need to do is get sort of 20, 25, you see that carp then, Rich? 25, 30 casters and ping them in. Double feed it. Now bearing in mind we've got this 6 metre swim going as well, gonna feed that. That'll be left for another carp, that'll be left for sort of 2 to 4 minutes now. So you can see them droppers coming down on that float now, them number 10's droppers just falling through the water. Now I know obviously when that float's settled, we're gonna have a little sort of like what, 5 or 6 mil maybe of bristle showing. If it stays up any higher, then obviously the small fish intercepted that on the drop. So that's all them droppers settled now, so that's reached the bottom. Incidentally, I've not sunk the line. If you can get away without sinking the line, then do it. Reason being is, again, you're in direct contact with that fish. If you're sinking your line, you're striking against obviously where your line's going into the water first. So what I'm going to do now is give it a little twitch, a little bit of encouragement like that. Usually we'll get you the bite. You know, if the fish watching that bait, like that. See, we had that little dink then, it was just starting to slow down, and we're into a fish on our first cast, and that was a small fish. Which is not a problem, you know, we want to be catching fish, don't we? We'll swing that one in. Lovely little roach to start with. Now, pay attention to where you're hooking the fish. Obviously, if they're around the top lip or the bottom lip, then you know it's bang on. If they're right down deep, then obviously you're too much over depth, so just shallow it up a little bit. So I'm going to go with a single maggot on again. And then I might mix it up a little bit next time. So again, swing that out first. Nice little gentle lob. But more importantly, feather that down. For this next cast actually, I'll get Rich to really sort of like zoom in onto where I'm fishing so you can see that what's happening when I stop the waggler, how that how the maggot's getting projected past where the waggler's ending up, so that you're in a nice tight line. So basically I'm looking to catch all my fish, you know, as it's falling, as it's falling through the water. So that was on the drop, that bite. Could have been a small fish, but we didn't feel it, we didn't bump anything. So what I'm going to do now, if them fish are coming up in the water, I'm going to feed first and then cast into it. You getting in on this, Rich? See, yeah? So feed them maggots first, and nice and quick, come back, stop it. So you can see that angle. Obviously float's landed, bait's gone past your float. You know you can't possibly tangle whatsoever. Time some more casters on that short 6 metre line on the pole swim, and about another sort of 5 or 6 minutes time. So you saw that one, that was on the drop, that one, little tiny fish. About another 5 or 6 minutes time, what I'm going to do is do that golf ball and put it on my long pole swim. Not seeing any signs yet, no fizzing or anything, but it doesn't mean they're not there. Now it's fish like that, them stampy roach, sort of like 2 to 3 ounce, something like that. That's what you're after. Then you sort of like, well, weight builders when you're after silvers, you know. Fish like that, carrying on putting them in your net, and you'll catch them all day if you wanted to. But what I want to try and do is target some of the bigger fish. If I was in a March, I'd be quite happily stay with them, but we'll fast forward a bit. So what I'm going to do this time is put double maggot on and see if we can get a bigger fish. Now obviously bearing in mind that fish that time came off feeding first, casting into it, but I want this bait to get down to the bottom. But you know, obviously the bigger fish will come up in the water, but I want to try and get down to the bottom and try and target them bigger fish. So you notice I'm double feeding near enough every time as well. But as I said, the fish, it's all about on the day. You know, we've had that one feeding first and then casting into it, so match conditions, I'd have carried on doing that. Obviously I'm just fast forwarding everything for you lot, so you can see, you know, if you want to try and target the bigger fish, this is what you'll do. It's far better to try and get your bait down to the bottom, double feed it, so that's where your bait's ending up. Again, I'm not sinking the line. This next cast though, you know, if we did have a real bad side wind, I'll show you how you sink your line, because some anglers do struggle with it. But it's really easy. It's again just getting little things but getting them right. That's all we need to do. Give that a bit of encouragement. So you can see already, you know, it's taking us a little bit longer to get a bite because we put that bigger bait on. Hopefully there's going to be a big snarler there, big dirty bream or a big hybrid or something. I'm keeping, you notice I'm twitching it, you know, pretty often. So you see that bite came off that twitch, and look at that. So we've got a bigger fish almost immediately, putting double maggot on. I know what I'm talking about, you know, I do know what I'm talking about sometimes. Oh, it's fell off though. How dare it fall off? But it just shows you. Yes, we've gone in with double maggot. We didn't feed, we're not looking to catch fish through the water. We casted first and then fed over the top. So our bait's going down on the bottom. I think that was a one, Rich, that one. Right, what I'm going to do this time, again, fast forwarding again, is talk through sinking your line. So if we had a real bad side wind and we were forced to sink our line, you know, if you're getting bites really quick, like them first couple of roach I've had, you don't need to sink your line, even if it's really windy, because the tautness of that line will actually help you strike into the fish. But if you're waiting sort of like, you know, a few minutes for a bite, then that's when you might have to sink your line, because your float will just end up out of position. So to sink the line, what I want to do is cast a little bit further past where I'm fishing. Again, feather it down. Now what I'll do, as I'm winding, my rod is roughly, well, it's probably like 2 foot under the surface. As I'm winding, I want that tight line, just as that float starts to go, and then I'm whipping up, and that line's completely sunk. And all I've probably moved that float about a metre, that's all, but that's how you sink your line, nice and easy. And then make sure your rod tip is slightly sunk as well, and that will keep your line completely sunk. That's how I'll have my rod, that's how I'll end it up. That rod just under the water. And again, I'll still be twitching it, still be doing them movements all the time, waiting for them lovely fishes. So I'll feed some more casters on that short line, 6 metres, give it a bit of a twitch out there. And this is the beauty of like silvers fishing. This is why I love it. You're always on the go. You know, some days when it's proper cold, it can take you a bit to get into the fish, but when they're on it, it's fantastic. It really is. You're always doing something, you're always busy, and time flies by, certainly in match conditions, because you've got a few swims on the go. I'm leaving sort of like my main swims, as I say, I'm priming them up. That's why we've got that long pole swim with the ground bait. hopefully to catch some skimmers, but who knows what we'll catch today. I wouldn't be surprised if the big F1's and carp rocked up, but hopefully we'll catch some skimmers on it, and we should catch some fish on this. You can see how much longer, as I said, we're waiting for them bites out there by putting double maggot on. I'm waffling, aren't I? So that's probably why it's gone a bit slow. Again, double maggot on, waiting a little bit longer, but there's a bigger fish there. You know, 2 casts with double maggot, 2 bigger fish. I don't know what this one is, Rich. Hopefully it's a big snarling bream. But it's fighting a bit hard for that. It might be a foot 1, you know. Might be a foot 1. We'll see. We'll see. What's it going to be? What's it going to be? Oh, it's a nice F1. This is what you should have been catching, Jay. Should have come here, mate, shouldn't you? But I mean, this is the beauty of this style of waggler fishing. Fishing like natural baits, you're going to catch everything swimming. It's awesome. I absolutely love it. Let's get the hook out of this one. So you saw how much longer we waited, you know, with that double maggot, that bigger hook bait. But, you know, look at the result. Beautiful F1 like that. Lovely fish. He's what, 6 ounce? Something like that. Might be a little bit bigger. Beautiful. So as I said, whilst you're priming them other swims, you can be into fish like that. Now, I mean, bearing in mind match conditions, like my disgorger, by the way, nice and pink. Bearing in mind match conditions, you know, if you're catching on this line, it's like any line, never ever come off feeding fish. Always stick with what you're catching, especially when you're catching fish like that. What, £1.5, getting on for £2 F1. And the beauty of this is, you know, you can catch some really big fish. You're not going to get bottomed out, obviously, because you can just let your line go. But you're going to catch everything swimming. It's a fantastic method. So next time you come back to me, I think I'll be snarled up on the pole. But I'm going to have another half an hour on this and catch some more fishes.